So good day, friends. This is Dr. Bob Hamilton, and you have tuned in today to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. So I thank you so much for being part of our day today. It means a lot to me. I know that you are all living lives and you're doing things, and you got kids and you got grandkids and you're going here and going there. The fact that you tuned in means a lot to me. So thank you. I appreciate that from my heart. If you like what you hear, and I hope you do, I want you, if you would, be kind enough to share this with your friends, with other people, neighbors, family. We're trying to build an audience for people to listen to us, and that's because I bring great people to you on a weekly basis, and today is really no exception. It's such a pleasure to welcome to the Hamilton podcast today, Susan Vogt. And Susan, welcome to the Hamilton podcast.
Happy to be here.
And let me tell you, folks, who Susan Vogt is. By the way, her last name is spelled V-O-G-T. Susan Vogt is an award-winning freelance writer and speaker on marriage, parenting, and spirituality. She's a professional Catholic family minister for over 30 years. She has served as an advisor to the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops Committee on Marriage and Family, and she lives in Covington, Kentucky, with her husband, Jim. Suzanne, the first thing I like to do, first of all, congratulations on your work. You've done a lot of stuff over the years, and I can see that you're deeply involved with your Catholic ministry, which is something we're going to talk about in detail a little bit later on. But before we get to that, I like my guests to introduce themselves, to talk a little bit about their life, where they're from, how their background, why you're doing what you're doing, and even why you wrote the book. But which, by the way, we're talking about a book today. I didn't mention that. We're talking about a book today called Parenting Your Adult Child. Keeping the Faith and Your Sanity is the subtitle of this book. We're going to talk about some of this adult child parenting. We're also going to talk about parenting in general. But before we get there, Susan Vogt, I'm going to turn the microphone over to you.
Okay, well, who am I? Where I am is that I grew up in Erie, Pennsylvania, and I now live in Covington, Kentucky. And in between those two spots, I spent about 10 years in Kalamazoo, Michigan. So I've been sort of on the edge of the eastern United States, the northern United States, and the southern United States. And other than where I am, my family is that I've been married to my husband, Jim, for 53 years as of yesterday. That was our anniversary.
Wow.
We have...
Let me stop and congratulate you. That's so fantastic. So you got married in 1971.
Exactly.
Wow.
Right.
Amazing. Well, good for you. God bless you for that. That's amazing.
And we're still trying to figure out how to celebrate it this year, but we haven't had an official, anniversary event because we've both been busy yesterday and today, but it will come. My family is that we have 4 adult children and 2 grandchildren, and so it's not a huge family. I have brothers and sisters, of course. Well, I don't have any sisters. I have brothers, but our direct family is the 4 adult children. And as I say in the book, I think, who wander the world in search of meaning. And that's been an experience for Jim and I to partner with them as they live in different places around the world. And it's been an education for us too. In terms of work, as you mentioned, I have been in family ministry for most of my adult life. I started out as a social worker. In fact, I was a parole officer for juvenile delinquents as one of my first jobs. And that taught me a lot.
Yeah, that taught you a lot. Yes, indeed.
And then I got a master's in counseling but did most of my work more in the preventive field of ministry with families, with children, those preparing for marriage, and those with children of all ages. And so that kind of ministry is where I've spent most of my time. And although more recently, I've been doing, since I am not working full time, getting paid for anything, I do a lot of my volunteer work in the area of environmental sustainability. So I've been doing a lot of ecology things, in addition to continuing to speak and write. So, faith-wise, as you mentioned, I'm a cradle Catholic, so I've been Catholic all my life, although that certainly has evolved and transitioned during my college years as I understood faith to be much broader and deeper than just what I learned in Catholic schools as I was growing up. So that's probably about enough background about who I am. Um, do you
No,
want me
no,
to
no,
just
no.
dig
This
into stuff, or do you have questions?
no. I think that you have definitely. I'm curious about what you said about in your college years, how you begin to look at your faith in maybe a different way, and realize that the essence of your faith was much deeper and broader and grander. And I think that that has to be when you're raised in a tradition, whatever that tradition may be. And that happened to me as well. I think that when you're a kid, you go to church, you go to whatever your parents take you to, right? And sometimes you can look and play the part, but it isn't really in your heart. Can you back up a little bit and tell us a little bit about what was that thing that happened when you were in your college years that caused you to maybe change your perspective?
Okay, sure. Um, of course, growing up, I, learned the commandments and the all of the Catholic sacraments and the things that go along with that. But then in college, I started to realize, and this was prompted by the kind of college I went to. I went to a Marianist college, University of Dayton in Dayton, Ohio, and I started to figure out, well, faith is more than just knowing the rules and keeping the commandments. It's how do I love people better? And how do I deal with contradictions? How do I go deeper into spirituality than just the surface? And keeping the rules. So because this was a Marianist college, it included both priests and brothers, religious brothers who were celibate, and religious nuns, the sisters in the Marianist order, but it also included lay people. And that's what I eventually made a commitment as a lay Marianist, um, which of course meant that I was free to marry or not, to have children or not. And so that's part of who I am, is exploring beyond just the facts and the rules.
Yeah, and I think that transformation has got to be. Let me ask you a more direct question. When you were up to your 20s, had you ever really read the Bible completely?
Oh, completely, no. I would read, of course, going to mass on Sundays, we always had the scriptures, but those, after a few years, get somewhat repetitive, and I would read parts of the Bible, but I've never read every single word. I go back and forth between just sometimes I just play a little game and open the Bible and see where it'll be. But every day I follow the readings, the scripture readings of the day, just to see how it applies today, which is different than it might have 10 years ago. How do I implement it? For me, maybe this is going a little beyond what you asked, but one of the practices I've developed spiritually is to end my prayer, my morning prayer, with, where is Jesus today? Who can I see Jesus in no matter if it's just driving the car and seeing somebody cross the street,
Yeah.
or talking to you today, or being on the phone. Just, how do I recognize Jesus' presence in anyone I see?
Yeah.
So that's sort of how I've matured.
Just and before, sorry, we're kind of taking a little bit of a tangent. Everyone listening, I apologize. But I look at, one of the I think you're talking about mindfulness. You're just kind of talking about that you're aware. You're not just kind of going about. You're actually aware of where you're at, the people you're meeting, the people you're looking at. One of my thoughts I have, and I share this with my wife, is that everybody you see, everybody that's walking down the street, everybody that you know, has things on their mind. They're going through things. They have issues. They have illness. They have people in their life who are struggling. They're financially dealing with issues. They are, whatever it may be. I don't care who you are. And I, as a pediatrician, being really amongst and in an ocean of people day by day, everyone I meet has something that's gnawing at them, I guess you would say, anxieties and worries and things that wake them up at night and keep them awake at night. And I think that part of it is just being, rather than sometimes being annoyed at people if they get in your way or whatever, or they're not kind to you, think about them as a person and them and look at them. And I have tried, and I'm not great at this, but I do try to look at people and look at them in that unique way, which I think is how the Lord looks at us. I think the Father in heaven is looking down. He knows all of us. He knows the numbers of hairs on our head, and so He certainly knows what we're thinking. And I think that love of God that we talk about is profound because He really knows us on an intimate level, which is something that I'm sure that you strive to do on a day-by-day basis.
Sure.
And that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. So you wrote this book, and the name of the book, friends, again, is called Parenting Your Adult Child. And it is published by St. Anthony Messenger Press in Cincinnati, Ohio. Is it available on Amazon?
Yes.
Okay. So those of you who are listening, you can find it on Amazon. I will repeat the name later on. But you begin your book with something really lovely. And by the way, the name is Parenting Your Adult Child. Now, listen, I will tell you something, friends. There is a lot in this book for a parenting period. Okay. Yes, those of us who do have adult children, and my wife and I, as everyone knows, we have a bunch of them. But the reality is that parenting is something that you just don't, all of a sudden you're parenting an adult child. You have to get to the adult years as well. And I love what you did here, Susan. You spelled out what we call the 15 virtues plus prayer for parents of grown children. Now, I think I would take out the grown for a second here and parents of children in general. And these 15 virtues are really profound. I'm not going to read all of them, but they include things like silence of words, restraint, mindfulness of emotions, listening, giving counsel, peacemaking, self-sacrifice, forgiveness, and other things as well. So there are 15 of them. I would like to talk about these because I think these are profound recommendations that you make, and you make them very, very compellingly in your writing. And by the way, I think it's important that we kind of establish where the foundation of these is. And I'll read the first paragraph of this chapter. It says, a number of the virtues in this book have their roots in the spirituality of the Society of Mary, or the Marianist, which outlines a path of holiness called the system of virtues. I have drawn from this heritage, but given many of the virtues more contemporary titles. Although each virtue can stand alone, they also build on one another. So before we start, I do want you to tell a little about the Society of Mary and what that really is.
Well, it often is confused or conflated with other Marian kinds of concepts. and they're not bad things, but things like devotions to Mary, saying the rosary, things like that. But the Marianist that I have found meaningful in my life is more looking to how Mary interacted with Jesus, how she was behind the scenes but present, and always looking in her own indirect way as to how to form another person, but not direct their life, trying to be part of it and support it, and learn to be a fellow learner. So those are some of the qualities in a quiet kind of way of being behind the scenes, but very supportive and important.
Yeah, and you really find Mary throughout the life of Jesus, obviously early on, and you also find her at the very end of his life and through his ministry as well. So she plays a critical role in the life of Christ, and obviously his development was a function to a degree of Mary and Joseph. There's no question about it. They had that foundation. So the virtues that you talk about, and I rattled off a handful of them. I'd like to kind of delve into some of these more deeply. And
Sure.
I'd like to start with your first one, which is called the silence of words. Um, you quote a scripture here, which I think about a lot, and I will read it. It says, "When words are many, transgression is not lacking, but the prudent are restrained in speech." Can you kind of elaborate on this concept of the silence of words?
Sure. Well, silence of words is actually one of the most challenging ones for me because I'm an extrovert. And the way I understand what I'm thinking about is I talk it out. But especially in parenting, and especially as our children got older, I learned the wisdom of not saying so much, uh, that they would learn a lot from just watching who I am and sometimes being silent and quiet and trying to be supportive without messing it up with a whole lot of words sometimes. So, one thing I had to learn personally was how, especially as our children got older, was how to talk shorter, how to talk smarter when I did talk. Sometimes that meant putting it in writing because our children can become deaf to things that they've heard over and over again, and they just don't pay that much attention. And to also not share so much my certainties about life, but also my struggles. So they knew me as a human person who things didn't always come easily to. And so and a lot of times that happens by being quiet, especially the older they get, because they've heard a lot of my words throughout their younger life. And as they get older, they may need to talk and have me just listen or to pause and be quiet before I speak. So those are some of the things that challenge me in terms of silence of words. It doesn't mean I never talk, but especially as children get older and they've heard me say the usual things probably many times, how can my silence also be instructive
Yeah.
and give them time to ponder?
Such good advice. You wrote here, "The longer I spoke, the less they listened," and I think that's so true. When you go on and on and on, and I think the word you used in your book was you start nagging, and there's nothing more annoying and frustrating for a child as to hear a parent nagging. And I think we all know what that means. It's that constant carping and constantly, nipping at your heels about something. And it's like, okay, I got the picture. This is this is a tough one because there's always this desire to want to say something. And I think that when I read through your book here and I was reading this particular virtue kind of stung me because I am a little bit like you in terms of my personality. I tend to be more of an extrovert. And certainly I'm not shy to share my words with people. And as I age as well, I'm realizing that I don't need to share as much. I don't need to, I like what you said is you talk smarter. Um, do you when you are having conversations with your children, do you rehearse these? Do you think in your mind, what am I going to say? Because when you talk about talk smarter, that sometimes you have to, you're talking in real time. You're having to think in real time. But how do you approach? How do you talk smarter?
Hmm. I probably pause, uh, try to listen to them. What are they really asking, if they are asking anything? What are their needs? And then I might give an example from my life, but maybe not. Um, but more to tune into what is behind the conversation we're having. What is that um, is driving it? What are their real needs? Are we just passing time, or are we um, really having one of those occasional deeper conversations where they're trying to figure out their lives and what they're going to do next? And, as our children get older, there's life decisions about what do I continue my schooling? How long? Where? Um, what about this relationship that um, a love relationship that they are merging into possibly? And they don't want me to tell them, I don't think, whether they should marry someone or not, but they might be the ones that need to think it through by talking and have me there just listening and wait to see if they ask a question. Um, if they do, then I could respond, but I'm not the one directing the conversation. Um, After a certain age, in what is that age? It depends on the child. And listening to the needs of the child and their style.
Yeah, and
I think sometimes it's a matter of imagination too, and that's the second virtue, in that um, I sometimes have to stretch myself and force feed myself, especially in later days with technology having grown way past what I grew up with. And um, I have to s- mature myself in my understanding of what's modern, what things I don't know technology-wise, and they teach me. In fact, when one of our sons who lives locally comes over once a week for dinner, and uh, he walks in the door and he pretty much says, "Okay, what's your computer question this week?" And I can tell you the answer even without looking at your computer. The answer is delete it. And, he's usually right,
yeah,
but I show him anyway just because I don't wanna delete something that maybe I'm gonna need later. But each of our children teaches me something as I've grown older. We have children, one who lives in Singapore right now, two who live in Washington, DC, and one who lives locally. So we learn a lot. I learn a lot by listening to their experiences and just trying to be supportive to them as they negotiate life's decisions and struggles.
that's right. You have a great line here. You say, "Force feed yourself ideas." It's sometimes, as we age, we don't want to hear new things. We don't want to learn new things. And you're saying, force feed, make it happen, push yourself, and learn something new. And listen, my children equally open my life to an infinity of ideas and new places and new thoughts, and they are constantly keeping me They're trying to keep me up to date. They're doing their job as much as they can. But that is it. I like how you put that. Force feed yourself new ideas. By the way, that is something that you can apply when you're younger as well, right?
Yes,
You can.
and I would, echo what you said earlier, I think, that although this is a book about young adult children, I think the virtues are pretty universal. They can apply in different ways, no matter what age your children are.
Absolutely. That's exactly why you're on the show, my dear. And that's what we're talking about. So, your third virtue is the virtue of restraint. And the idea is that showing, not, I think, the first thing you say is wait. So, I'll let you take it from there. So, the virtue of restraint.
And of course, that's connected with silence of words, that instead of jumping in with a solution, my solution to something they're dealing with, um, just waiting to hear what's on their mind and giving it a little time for both of us to ponder. And sometimes, because, as I said, I'm an extrovert and my natural inclination is to just jump in with some, solutions, some things that I tried, or maybe you should do this. But to try what AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, mentions in some of their stuff about take a breath, wait, ponder, take some silent breaths, to slow myself down, to wait and see what emerges from in their minds, and then try to build on that. So the restraint is not jumping in too soon with my solutions or my ideas.
That's good. I think that there's a tendency for certainly parents to want to fix things. They don't like to see their children anxious or in distraught about anything, and they want to fix them right now. And waiting is part of that sense of just standing back and saying, okay, we're going to you mentioned ponder and let things happen naturally. The number 5 virtue you talk about is the virtue of mindfulness of emotions. I love this, and I think that being mindful, of course, this word is becoming kind of bantered around very commonly now in our world. But I'd like you to have your take on this particular virtue.
Okay, sure. Of course, the emotions can vary from worry, being sad, being disappointed in them or in myself, fear, anger, etc. Those are the ones that are more of the negative emotions, usually, that can catch us up in anxiety. And what I've been trying to train myself to do more is to be aware if I'm feeling one of those negative emotions, either related to parenting or just life in general, and to think, okay, let's use some restraint here a moment, be creative, use the ingenuity, and think, what is the good in this situation? Um, is there something I need to forgive in myself because I've blundered in some way, or in my child, or in somebody I complained about? And so there's um, the combination of, yeah, we're all going to feel those negative emotions at some times. I've felt today in preparing for this interview, anxiety about, oh, would I say the right things? Would I get tongue-tied? Fears. And then I thought, nope, it'll be what it'll be. I will give you what I can. That's me. And in a strange way, others who hear even my mistakes and my fumbling around, perhaps that will be a positive thing because it gives them permission to say, I'm not so bad. She does this. She fumbles, she searches for the right word, and here they asked her to be on the show. So
By
it
the way,
gives permission.
if I can interject, so far so good. You're doing a wonderful job. So if you were anxious or worried about doing a good job, please put that behind you because this is a great conversation. So
Yes, and each of them teach us something, even those negative emotions, even if it, and then to forgive myself and to forgive another person that I might be annoyed at.
I think that human beings are deeply emotional. We sometimes allow our emotions to direct our lives, and this is something that we all have to. Yes, fears and anxieties and sadness, these are all things that happen probably on a day-by-day basis. And part of maturity and part of learning how to navigate this world is learning how to subjugate those and put them in the right order. Also, there are emotions of joy and elation and delight and goodness and gratitude and blessing. So we also have to. I think it's nice to live in that light too. I'd like to quote. This is right in your first little paragraph. You quote Jesus, and he said, "So don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will bring worries of his own. Today's trouble is enough for today." I love that. We sometimes think about, oh no, what's going to happen next week or tomorrow. I think what Jesus is saying in this verse is there's enough to worry about today. Okay, just focus on what is right before you, right this moment. Tomorrow will take care of itself. A great virtue, mindfulness of emotions. I want to also ask you to talk a little bit about, and we've kind of hit on this already, but the virtue of listening. I think
Yes.
this is so critical as a parent when you're parenting, listening. Well, I will say my part. I'd like to hear your words.
Okay, well, because listening is a challenge to me, because I'm always thinking, what should I say next? Um, but what I've been trying to train myself to do and exercise is to say, don't listen with my answer running. That I'm being quiet, but I'm trying to think of what I'm going to say next to make my point. So it's trying to avoid that and also to avoid what I call self-summarizing syndrome, SSS, that um, it's not so important that I make all my points and make them clearly. Um, listening first to see, does my child or my spouse or even the person on the street, do they want to hear my experience? Do they want to hear my advice? Or do they just need to be listened to? Sometimes they need to talk to understand themselves better and know somebody cares, and without having to give them an answer or an advice. Um, Although the listening can also sometimes be listening to a friend who has children, who maybe is in a little later life stage than myself, as to how they handled a situation. Or it might mean, even in some circumstances, listening to a professional counselor. So listening to our children, yes, listening to people who have different experiences, um, and not thinking that I have to solve it all and figure it all out myself, because that's my natural inclination as a parent. I've been raising this child for so long. I've been the authority. I've been the one who helped them make all of their decisions, and then come to a point where I say, I'm not in charge of their life anymore. And I want to listen to them, and I want to, if they ask, I will give them my advice. Um, if they don't ask and I see a real danger, a life-threatening situation or some kind of abuse, I may speak up earlier, but mostly to wait until they seem to need or want my words that I hope will be wise.
Right. The idea of listening is profound. Larry King, who we know, the talk show or the TV personality, made a great quote. He said, I never learned anything while I was talking." And he was a great interviewer. He was a great listener. Of course, he was famous for that. But I think that that is such a profound thing. When you listen and you actually take it in, that's when you're learning. You're not learning when you're just kind of bantering on. So I won't banter on too long here. I do think that listening is a profound thing. I thought about this as I read your book. I thought to myself, am I a good listener, even with my wife, with my patients, with my kids? That thought crossed my mind. And I think one thing I can add to this conversation is when you are listening, you look at people, you look them in the eye, and you make that personal eye contact with them, so they know that you're with them. And some people listen with their head down, and you kind of go, "Are you listening to me or not?" Usually, your kids do that, but but when you make that eye contact, you know that you're locked into them, and you're getting you're hearing them, what they're saying. One last thing, your beautiful comment about when you're listening, if you're always trying to formulate your answer to their comments. You say that, this is, you shouldn't be doing that when you're having a real conversation. That's debate. And your purpose of, engaging your children is not to debate them, is to have a conversation, a rich and back and forth conversation, which is not a debate. Sometimes you get into that mode with people, and that is usually not a great space to be in. I want to talk about the virtue of renewal and resolutions. This is another, you quote again a Bible verse. It says, "So let us not grow weary in doing what is right, for we will reap at harvest time if we do not give up." I love this idea. We just went through, I guess it's been 3 months now, but we just went through January 1st. Are you a resolution maker? Do you make New Year's resolutions as a general rule? And is it something that you're recommending in your book here?
Well, I don't think I've done New Year's resolutions in a long time in any direct, organized way. I come to, in my morning prayer, I will often, eventually, come to points where I say to myself, I think I need to change the way I'm uh, focusing too much on work or focusing too much on a particular project. And so I will come to a decision that I want to change something about, or I might say, hey, you know, our my husband and I have not been connecting as emotionally and as uh, as intentionally as we have, and let's have just a fun night. Let's have do something. Since yesterday was our anniversary, I don't want to forget that we want to celebrate that, even though yesterday was too packed to do it in yeah, a typical way. And so the resolution to not let relationships slide, maybe one of our kids who lives out of town, even though we have um, monthly calls with the whole family and weekly calls with our Singapore son and his wife, um, we there are times when we don't have as frequent contact with each other on a deeper level. And so I say, I need to have a more meaningful conversation, maybe with my daughter, or, to check in with them on a more extensive level than just a phone call. And so those kind of resolutions come up through my quiet time mostly, yeah, and it's not on a schedule. It's just observing life and where the relationships are going and who I haven't interacted with much lately.
Yeah. I mean, I do that too. And I say, you know what, I need to make a phone call. I need to call a friend or one of my children. And I think that this idea is just being faithful, being,
Yeah,
ongoing
yeah.
and not getting away from what we know works. I love this virtue of peacemaking. Peacemakers, how do you make peace? Because we have right now, as we're speaking right now, there are a lot of conflicts in this world, and how do we go about that in our daily life? I don't have much power over what's happening in Ukraine or in Israel right now, but how are we peacemakers in our daily life?
Well, um, I think one is not to stereotype, and this happens both in my personal relationship with my husband. Okay, you're the one that's good at directions, and so, would you just figure out the maps for getting us to this next place? Um, but and different people have different strengths. And so, what on the peacemaking part, I say, well, okay, how can I listen without already having formed an opinion about what they're going to say? Because they typically say that. And I apply that to not only family members, but society at large. And in fact, sometimes listening to someone politically that I disagree with, let's say, for example, teaches me, okay, listen with clean ears without stereotyping and assuming that I know what the other person's going to say. And can I find some truth in that? Can I find some good? Because um, we know that assuming, you've probably heard, makes an ass out of you and me. That trying to listen with clean ears without figuring that I already know what they think and what kind of person they are because of their, um, you know, political or opinions and positions, or because of, um, their job or something else that I've stereotyped. Oh, people of this race or of this age or of this background, or poverty or wealth, that just I have to stop myself from judging that they will be different from me and not like me, or just trying to say, well, what can I learn from this person who's different from me? And that learning is a growth,
Yeah.
and it's filling me out.
There are times when we have that happen to us where people will assume something about you and you kind of go, you don't really know me, and you're coming against me in a way that you don't really know who I am. And when that happens to us, we feel how that is so off-putting
Yeah, we
because
feel discounted, and so let's turn that around and, say, I don't want to, impose that kind of feeling on someone else,
that's right.
so try
That's
to listen first, try to listen non-judgmentally. We may still disagree. It doesn't mean I'm gonna change my opinion, but I wanna be open to understanding them more clearly.
yeah. How does that apply to kids?
Yeah. The same way. I'm trying to think of an example, uh, that when have we disagreed? Well, we were recently in Australia with our one child who lives very far away and traveling together. And so, um, I when Jim and I travel, we like to, know what's coming ahead of time, to have a plan. And when we walk fast because that's exercise and that's hiking too. Well, our son and daughter-in-law walk more slowly and said, wait a minute, they're not keeping up. and and I said, well, no, it might be a physical thing. It might be that they're noticing things that I don't, that they're not as task oriented as I am, because they're experiencing life on a different level with different needs. And so um, it's okay to be different. And it's not always one way is better or righter than the other.
So true. And I think that when you acknowledge that and allow that to play out in your life. It makes a big difference. I'm watching our time here. I want to finish off with something very upbeat, and this is the virtue of joy. First of all, I love the name, the word joy. It brings me joy when I even say the word. I have a daughter named Hannah Joy, and that brings me happiness to even think about her. But you mentioned this word, and you talk about making that virtue part of our life on a day-by-day basis.
Okay, well, I, as you might have been figuring out, tend to be, in addition to being task-oriented, I also can worry a lot and be, afraid of problems. And sometimes that can be debilitating, keep me from taking chances. And so, what if I'm feeling too much blocked because of my fears, I sometimes have to force myself into remembering times of joy, or force myself into saying, okay, stop just fretting about this. Um, think of something happy, remember something happy. Um, believe that this too will pass, and that what is a joyous time that I've had in the past, or that I hope to have in the future? And maybe I have to create a little bit of it. So the joy is, sometimes it comes naturally, of course, when good and happy things happen, but not always. And so it's like hit pause, stop fretting, and start to think, to remind myself of some joyous times in the past, or that I hope will happen in the future.
Well put. I think that it is incumbent upon us to sometimes stop and say, you know what, I have a lot to be thankful for.
Yeah.
Life itself is a tremendous blessing and a joy, and start with that. And I think that can put a smile on your face when you remember some of your grandchildren. Okay, so we're going to finish up right here. I wanted to say, Susan Vogt, you have been such a delight to converse with. Friends, she has written a beautiful book called Parenting Your Adult Child. It is published by who? By the St. Anthony's Messenger Press.
Messenger Press, right.
And you can buy it on Amazon. You'll find it. Again, her last name is spelled Vogt. Susan V. Vogt, and it's definitely a book. Even though the name Parenting Your Adult Child, it is definitely rich in advice in terms of parenting in general, and I recommend it highly to everyone listening today. So with that, I want to sign off. I just want to say again, thank you, Susan, for being part of this day.
And I have just one more thing. If I could sum up everything we've said about the transition towards our children growing up, I'd probably say, how do we let go of them but still remain supportive?
It's a good question. And it really is. That's the profound question we all have to do when our kids march out the door, right? It really is. That's a good thought. And that's a good way to end the show. So friends, thank you for tuning in today to the Hamilton Review. Appreciate you being here. And until next time, be well. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of your day. Tune in again next week on Apple Podcast. Rate and comment and tell a friend.